We're joined now by Marc Schulman, a columnist at Newsweek. Marc, thank you so much for joining us this evening. What more do we know about this decision? Apparently it was in the works for a while.
We don't really know a lot about it. In other words, once again, the question is, what does the Trump administration want to do vis-a-vis Ukraine? We've always been worried about that from day one. Many people didn't support Trump specifically because of that, because he said that he was going to stop support for Ukraine. He claimed he was going to bring peace. He obviously was not able to bring peace. He wasn't able to get Putin to agree to anything that would be acceptable to anyone in the international community. He has a strange relations with the Russians that we still do not understand. So if it was Biden, there's no question in my mind the arms would have continued going despite whatever limitations in the U.S. stockpile. U.S. stockpiles for the future of the Ukrainians need these weapons today to keep on fighting the Russians. I'm not surprised by the move. Just disappointed. I was hoping that Trump was changing his tune vis-a-vis Ukraine after he saw the fact that Putin's goal was just to conquer all of Ukraine and not to make peace. So it's sad. Hopefully the Europeans are going to be able to step in most of the areas. The one area that's going to be difficult to step in is going to be some of the aerial defense missile systems. We're the only ones in the world other than the United States that have effective systems like that. And obviously we don't have any to spare. And plus, we certainly don't want to get on the wrong side of Putin at the moment. But that's a whole other story.
Right. It is a whole other story. But at the same time, it's all really kind of connected. I mean, how concerned would you say that Ukraine should be right now? I mean, you mentioned the Europeans might step in. And also, how concerned should Israel be? Because is this a sign that the U.S. is running low? And how should we take this here in Israel?
Okay, let's look at it. Okay, let's look at it in two different ways. There has been a shortage of munitions in the world now for 2 years. There's been a shortage of shells. There's been a shortage of everything because the Ukrainian war has consumed so much more consumables than anyone thought was possible. And then we used a tremendous amount of consumables in terms of our war. We used a lot of munitions in Gaza over a period of time, of course, in Lebanon, and of course, just now in Iran. There is a worldwide shortage that has been created by the fact that most of the major defense manufacturers combined, and there were all these mergers over the years in the United States. So there are only two major defense manufacturers in the United States. There are a number of smaller ones, but there are only two big ones in the United States. Israel, we have three major manufacturers and a number of small ones. It's a problem. It's something we need to be concerned about. This worldwide shortage is a big problem. What the United States is going to do, that's the secondary problem. I don't think we have to worry about getting munitions from the United States at the moment, as long as we go along with whatever President Trump wants. We have to go along with whatever President Trump wants, because if we don't, we could find ourselves in a difficult position too. It once again underscores the fact that we need to become more and more independent in terms of munition manufacturing, something we had avoided doing over the last 20 years. Ever since we gave up on the Lavi, that's our own airplane that we had designed in the 1980s, and we gave up on that. Ever since we did that, we've become more dependent in certain areas on the United States, and we have to try to move away from that as much as possible.
All right. Well, until that happens, in the meantime, there's still very much an issue of dependency, or the counting on the U.S., let's put it that way. Could this potentially, for Israel specifically, be seen as a positive, seen as, well, the U.S. is going to be prioritizing perhaps differently and choosing, if necessary, if worse comes to worse, Israel over Ukraine?
I mean, I guess you could say Israel over Ukraine. I mean, that's a terrible choice, quite honestly. I mean, I was one of those people who thought Israel should have supported Ukraine from the day that the Russians invaded. So it's very hard to say that. I mean, the Russians have been aligned with the Iranians. And so it's a very hard choice to make. We'll get more weapons because the United States is not going to give them to Ukraine. I don't think we're there. Hopefully, we're not going to need an intensive amount of weapons anytime soon. Hopefully, we won't have any intensive warfare in the near future. I'm sure we'll need it sometime down the road, but we'll have time to deal with that. So I can't think from the Israeli standpoint it's a good thing. I think from the Israeli standpoint, we have to worry about one major factor, and that's the America First movement and the United States becoming more and more isolationist. Now, they say, well, Israel's outside that group, but we always have to be worried. If the United States becomes more and more isolationist, then someday that's going to affect us as well. So I think it's a bad sign for Israel, actually, if the United States gives less arms to Ukraine, because it's the bad sign when the United States gives less arms to its allies, and we're an ally. So I don't look at it that way. I look about it as a bit of concern, not a five-alarm fire, but certainly a bit of a concern in terms of Israel as well.
All right, Israel being prepared to potentially have to be on its own. It's not really that out of left field. All right, Marc Schulman,
No,
stay
not
with us.